let's talk. So it's in my opinion that the personal brand as we know it is dead. The reason being is because its blueprint has been widely taught and thus commoditized, making it so that if you are planning on trying to stand out, following it, well, you're just going to become a predictable part of the noise. This video is going to be a part of my Build Your Magnetic Brand series, where I've spent thousands of hours, so you don't have to, analyzing how the creator economy is changing. This is step 2, figuring out how to stand out from the Me Too's by uncovering your secret sauce. Now, in order to do that, we need to figure out what could potentially be making you come across as a Me Too wannabe, because I know you're not. I believe the reason why people are now more exhausted than ever is because they are doing everything that we have been taught correctly, but is not getting us anywhere anymore. The reason being is because authenticity is now a paradox. The pressure to be authentic and share our story has created a new kind of performance, and in some cases has even led audiences to feel authenticity fatigued, and that the brandification of entrepreneurship has made everyone try to become a brand, where they have their I help blank with blank by blank statements on their banners, making it feel like everyone is just another Me Too commodity. And that when anyone tries to share their content online, the commodification of just advice has been making it hard for anyone to actually create content that really gets people engaged. Lastly, with AI booming over the years, we're seeing a lot of wannabe entrepreneurs trying to make a quick buck by flooding the landscape with low quality, regurgitated AI generated content. And all of this leads to audiences backlashing against content creators, experts, thought leaders, and especially gurus. This hits the hardest for people who are actually trying to be a real deal, because you're just kind of being lumped with all of these other wannabes and all of this other AI generated crap content. But how do we get here? In order for us to figure out the new potential unfair competitive advantage, we need to look into the past and see how the creator economy has evolved and what drove its changes, because then it could provide more context for the stage that we're in right now. Between 2005 and 2012 was the era of the platform. When I think of the key figures who really influenced the ideologies of the time, it was Gary Vaynerchuk and Tim Ferriss, who's the author of The 4-Hour Workweek. This started the wave of people wanting to enter the online entrepreneur space. And it makes sense that at that time, Gary was saying to be consistent and be bold, because at the time, no one really was doing what he was doing. By him just being consistent and taking the leap to even embark on this journey, he's now able to play as a first mover, which gives him first mover's advantage. I noticed that even today, we see a lot of people talk about how you want to be consistent and you need to push out quantity. Now, I'm not saying oh my gosh, heavily disagree, Gary Vaynerchuk, you're wrong. No. I see the merit of what he says, and I believe there's some truth to it, especially in the era of the platform. Because at the time, platforms like YouTube, Twitter, blogging were new frontiers, and the algorithms really favored just new activity. And so the creator who could produce the most frequently won. This strategy really thrived in a landscape where there was low competition. All you really need to do is outwork, outpost, outhustle anyone who came into the space, because you'll win. Now, the era of the platform matured, and it started to showcase that people can be successful. And whenever there's gold, there's a rush. Oh my gosh, I just came up with that wordplay on the fly. And that led us to the era of the polished business. From around 2012 to around 2018, no longer was it just a passion, it is now turned into a legitimized profession. And that is what powered the rise of the guru, because people were looking for a roadmap. That was the demand. They wanted someone to chart out the pathway of how to get success in this new age entrepreneur world, and they wanted to follow it. This is also where the commodification of advice starts to happen. When you see so many 3 ways to build your personal brand, or 3 ways to get healthy, 3 ways to lose weight, all of it just starts blending. And information, tips, how to starts to become a commodity and makes it hard for any person to stand out. This is where we see the rise of brandification of content strategies, where people are just taught this formulaic, niche down, figure out your 5 content pillars, post in that, and make sure you have your I help blank with blank by blank statement on your banner. But again, things were still not breaking, and there was still a lot of money flowing, which makes more people start to enter the game. And that is what leads us to era 3. The era of the performed self. From 2018 to around today, we saw that people simply following the blueprint. Sometimes it's not working. We see that it's working for some of the dominant players in the niches who already hold market share. But what about the newcomers? At this point, we start to see that audiences were getting fatigued by the guru. The market got saturated with just people sharing their advice. So the only thing to do left is to be authentic. This is where we saw rise of the vulnerability post, the confessional posts. Share your vulnerability. Share your story. Like, you know when a strategy is just way too overused when you start seeing bro marketers use it. Since I analyze this space, I'm subscribed to quite a bit of bro marketer newsletters just to get a pulse on the going-ons. No longer does it actually feel authentic, especially when we know that it's slightly being performed. Because systematized authenticity is by definition not authentic. But this paradoxically became one of the most exhausting performances of all, because the previous ideologies didn't go away. So not only did people need to be ruthless in quantity and consistency, but they also needed to be professionalized with all of these tactics, systems, and tools. And now they needed to share their story, share their vulnerability. When more people are playing the game, the landscape and its rules change. And so now the question is, what is an unfair advantage that can really last the entire game? And for that, let's talk about moats. A moat in the medieval times was a wide ditch that often surrounded a castle. Sometimes it had water in it, and this was a structural defense against enemies. So in today's world, we need a moat to defend against the 2 enemies. And that is, number 1, just the sheer amount of competition constantly entering the game. So when we're thinking about a sustainable moat that we can build, we need to take this into account, that most likely we're not going to be the only players in our niche, and that we need to be prepared that there's new players going to be coming in all the time, making audiences fatigued. We also need to take into account that there's already perhaps dominant players already existing in sub-markets or sub-niches. The second enemy is the rise of AI. With AI rising, it creates a couple of problems. We already talked about AI content flooding algorithms, which causes audience exhaustion, which also makes content itself no longer valuable. But the second order problem that it creates is that now other entrepreneurs, other content creators can start playing a quantity game like no other. And so both of these enemies kind of reminded me of a concept that is kind of prevalent in the investment space, which is when everyone is buying, you're selling. But when everyone is selling, you're buying. And so for me, I'm thinking it's so ingrained in the ideologies to go after quantity, to mass produce, to continue feeding the landscape with just content and information, as if the landscape actually needs more. So the moat needs to be drenched in how can we become the signal in the noise? So I started to look into the entertainment and music industry, because those industries are notorious for being highly competitive and incredibly cutthroat, with new pretty faces coming in all the time. So I started asking what makes someone pop to the top in the entertainment industry. I feel like it factor has been studied for quite some time. It's been tried to be templatized, systematized from all of this studying. We can theorize all we want, but the people who are actually going to have a shot at becoming the it factor are the people playing the game. But not just playing the game, playing the long game. Because it doesn't matter if we can deconstruct what goes into it factor when the energy that's powering the it factor is real lived obsession. Because that is something that cannot be imitated, and if it is imitated, it cannot be imitated for long. You are either obsessed or you're not. Like, I know, whenever you come across someone who you just know this is what they eat, live, and breathe. They go to sleep thinking about this. They wake up thinking about this. That energy of obsession is what just jump starts that machine on having it factors start to sparkle. Because it starts to bleed through in your content, in your messaging, in your work. Because then it will be quality messaging, it will be quality content, it will be quality work. And that is why ideologies from era 1 and 3, while correct on a tactical surface level, it starts to break down when too many people are doing it. Because the fact is that the majority of players in a game, they're most often not real deal players. See, most people come into the entrepreneur game because they want passive income, because they want to escape their 9 to 5. They're always so shocked that it's so much more harder than they thought it was going to be. And a significant portion of them drop out of the game entirely. The very few people are just so results driven that they only care about the money or the fame, that they'll just do anything it takes to get there. They're copycats. And so it is the copycats that actually exhaust the strategies that would have probably worked and makes audiences get fatigued towards them. But the highest tier level is actually just living it. You're not trying, you're not faking it, you're just obsessed with it. Because you will always be able to run circles around the person who is just trying, because to you it's not trying, you're just living, you're just breathing, you're just eating. And that leads me to what the biggest real unfair advantage that the entrepreneurs do not have on you. The markets now do not follow just information. They follow perspective. But let me break down exactly what that means. While gurus rely on their conclusions, their advice, their 3 tips for losing weight, while that can easily be grabbed from AI, what cannot, like I mentioned, is real obsession. And when someone is really obsessed with something, they're constantly inquiring. And so when I say fatigued markets do not follow information, they follow perspective. What they're really following is your process of inquiry. How are you curating information? How are you curating your stories? What is your process of interpreting information? What is your process of gathering information? What are you choosing to pay attention and choosing not to pay attention to? And when you can start to build a theme or a message, that is harder to replicate because it requires a lot more deeper thinking than simply going onto ChatGPT or Gemini. Your brand is not your conclusions. Your brand is the observable process of your inquiry. When audiences have been burned by crap content that wasted their time because someone was optimizing for just strictly quantity, when audiences have been burned by polished, perfected systems or performed authenticity, the next thing they're going to look into to see if you're the real deal is the observable integrity of your work. Your work meaning your mind. To illustrate this, the other day I was searching for some help, some thought leaders in the nutrition space, specifically for prenatal nutrition. And I thought the potential audience members of my niche would think my niche is saturated and confusing, but the nutrition niche is also saturated and confusing. There's so many people posting content about prenatal nutrition. Do this, don't do that, don't do this, but do this. Here's the 3 tips. Here's what you gotta eat. And it's like also conflicting information. I started to get scared. I'm like, oh my gosh, like who do I trust? But as I continued to go through the noise, I started to find my signals. I started to see the lighthouses. And the reason that I saw them as signals is because I consumed long form pieces of content from them. We're talking YouTube videos, podcasts, perhaps interviews, instead of just short form, superficial level content like Instagram post that says 3 tips for a healthy pregnancy or 3 mistakes most pregnant women make. Or having a post going, I used to be blank, now I am blank because I did blank. DM me for details. Essentially, it is in my opinion that content formats that make it really hard to hide that you're a wannabe or that you're just using AI to generate your content is where people who are the real deals start to shine. It makes people see them as, oh, they're not just another wannabe trying to cash in on the creator economy trend. They're actually a real deal using the creator economy as a vehicle for their message. So, for example, Lily Nichols, who wrote the book Real Food for Pregnancy. The reason why I saw her as a real deal is because the whole premise of the book is that the conventional pre-nutrition guidelines are outdated, insufficient, and not adequately supported by the most current scientific evidence. She advocates for a nutrient-dense whole foods approach. She simply didn't just state this, she really built the case for this. I saw how she came to these conclusions. It was the process of her inquiry and the delivery of her message that got me to see her as a real deal. So the results of people like Lily Nichols to me are these people have the magical it factor. They are on the correct side of the supply versus demand curve because I was telling my husband the other day how if they had an offer that I could toss high ticket money at, I totally will. So people are often wondering, like, how come it's so hard for me to sell my offers, or how come it's so hard for me to get attention? Then they go down this path of like, okay, let me try this hack, let me try this tactic using scarcity, deadline funnels, scripts, templates, and it's still not working. They think their niche is dead. They think the strategy is dead. When actually it's because they have missed the foundational element. They are not positioning themselves as someone who's a real deal. So how do we put all of this into practice? I kind of honed in on some questions that we need to ask ourselves. So the first thing is we need to switch our question from what is our niche? What can we niche down to? Because I've noticed that this actually just creates more confusion because people are scared to even move forwards because they're like, I don't know if I niche down correctly, if I'm going into the right niche. I just can't move forwards. I'm having analysis paralysis. I just feel like that's an irrelevant question because in my personal opinion, I feel that all niches and sub-niches are already dominated by a major player. I think the new question is instead of just finding like these static niches, it's instead going, where can I plant my flag and monopolize? It's a different mind state entirely. Like the reason why I want to make this distinction so hard is because when you actually switch the question from a state of scarcity to a state of abundance, that's actually weirdly where you actually unlock the hidden opportunity because you're not operating from a place of fear and like, oh my gosh, where am I going to fit in? You're operating from a place of I am going to carve out a space. One is like action orientated. One is more like I'm going to get it done. The other is more like, let me wait and like find an opportunity. Because the reason why we need to be in this mind state is because the next question we need to ask ourselves is what is going to be your unshakable point of view? Like, what are you going to go to battle for? What are you going to die on the hill for? This is about developing your unique perspective through your curation, through your process of inquiry, through your thought, through your experiences. If we were to carefully deconstruct checked some of the players that have really lasted in this game, we saw that they never really operated in a niche. They operated on their message that they monopolized. We talked about Gary Vaynerchuk in the beginning of this video. During that time, why do we even remember him? We remember him because of his crush it philosophies, of his hustle, outwork, outperform, outpost philosophy. And that is him. And we're able to remember that. But I want to make a distinction that this is simply not just sharing an opinion. This is about creating your signature unshakable point of view. Something that you are going to become known for. Because the thing is, like what we discussed, with the rise of people coming onto the space, everyone's a content creator, simply just sharing your story, which anyone can really do, simply just stating your values, like we stand for courage, we stand for inclusivity. Anyone can say that. So what this has created is that the digital landscape has now just become one big clubhouse, one big social party. Everyone just like mingling and just sharing their ideas. But if you really want to become the signal from the noise, then you need to stand for something. You need to plant your flag, own your monopoly with your unshakable point of view. Now, the next biggest problem that people often have when they're trying to come up with this signature message where they're going to stake their claim is that the message oftentimes lacks bite, meaning that the message itself doesn't give people a reason to follow it. There's no emotional stakes for people, audiences to be moved by that message. Like if your message is be happy, by itself, it is meaningless. It has no emotional drive. Again, there's no bite. And that is what I want to explore in my next video. By the ways, this video is sponsored by me. I'm currently running my beta cohorts of Project Thought Boss, an intimate co-creational experience to help you implement some of the things I share here on this channel. This experience starts with a complete top to bottom diagnosis of where you're at right now. So we can figure out like what's going to be the biggest needle mover for you and to find the root cause of why things are not working. From here it becomes a co-creational experience where we kind of go into your mind, go into your life history, your life experiences, your obsessions to find a unique message that you can monopolize on to help you not come across as a Me Too and instead own your category of one. If you would like to learn more about this, you can click the link down below. Again, no one is forcing you. If you don't want to do that, don't worry. I still got lots of content that I'm so excited to release, so stay tuned.